It was our 8th anniversary, and I'd spent the afternoon cooking his favorite meal. He came home late with takeout, completely oblivious. The look on his face when he saw the table wasn't guilt, it was just blank confusion. He gave me a quick, "Oh man, I'm so sorry, I totally blanked." But there was no real remorse in his eyes. He was already scrolling through his phone, and in that moment, the forgotten anniversary wasn't the problem. It was that it didn't even matter. Our problem wasn't some dramatic betrayal. It was quieter and almost more terrifying. I called it the silent erosion, this slow, creeping process that was turning our once vibrant connection into a colorless routine. We had become functional roommates. We coordinated schedules, paid bills, and discussed what to buy at the grocery store. But the warmth, the laughter, the simple joy of being together, it was all gone. The human cost was immense. I felt invisible, like a ghost in my own life. The loneliness was profound because he was right there, just a few feet away, but emotionally, he was a million miles distant. Every night, one of us would ask, "How was your day?" And the other would reply, "Fine." Yours, it was a script we followed without thinking. We weren't listening, we were just waiting for our turn to speak. I remember so many nights sitting on the couch together, in total silence, the only light on our faces coming from our phones. We were inches apart, but we might as well have been in different countries. We were building a wall between us, screen by screen. We had stopped thinking as a team. He'd make plans without checking with me, and I'd do the same. The us that used to be the center of our world had dissolved into a separate me and him. Sometimes I'd find myself thinking about how we used to be. Our apartment used to be filled with laughter and stupid inside jokes. Now, the silence was so heavy it felt like a physical weight in every room. One morning, I really looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't see the happy, vibrant woman I used to be. I saw someone who looked tired, sad, and deeply lonely, and I knew this couldn't continue. It was easy to blame him for everything, for forgetting the anniversary, for being on his phone. But I had to be honest with myself. I had stopped trying too. I stopped offering the small kindnesses I once did. I could feel a quiet resentment growing inside me. Every time he left a dish in the sink or didn't notice a haircut, it felt like another piece of evidence against him. I was keeping score, and that's a game no one wins. I started having fantasies, not of being with someone else, but just of being alone. The idea of a quiet apartment that was all mine felt peaceful. The thought that being truly alone might be better than being lonely with him was terrifying. We had developed a touch barrier. A simple hug felt formal, a brush of the hand accidental. That easy, casual affection that had once been a constant language between us had been completely lost. A friend asked me how Mark was, and I gave my usual, "Oh, he's good, busy with work." She paused and looked at me, really looked at me, and asked, "But how are you guys?" I almost broke down right there in the coffee shop. There were mountains of things I wanted to say, but I was terrified. I was afraid that if I opened the floodgates, it would lead to a fight we couldn't come back from. The silence, as painful as it was, felt safer. I was scrolling through old photos on my phone and saw one from early in our relationship. The way he was looking at me, with this huge, open, joyful smile, it was like a punch to the gut. I missed that version of him, and I missed the me that he was smiling at. After that hollow anniversary, I drove to the grocery store and just sat in the parking lot, crying. It wasn't angry crying, it was grief. I was mourning the beautiful thing we had built and then let crumble, and I knew I had hit rock bottom. Sitting there, I realized I had a choice. I could surrender to the silent erosion and let our relationship fade completely. I could leave, or I could decide to fight for us, to make one real, conscious effort to find our way back. A question popped into my head, clear as day. What if I go first? What if I stop waiting for him to change and I start the change myself? Not with resentment, but with genuine, unconditional kindness. That night, instead of scrolling social media, I started searching for answers. I typed how to reconnect with your partner into Google and fell down a rabbit hole of articles and studies. For the first time in months, I felt a tiny spark of hope. I stumbled upon the work of a researcher named Dr. John Gottman. He talked about an emotional bank account in a relationship. The idea is that you make deposits through small, positive interactions and withdrawals through negative ones. The core insight that blew my mind was his magic ratio. He found that stable, happy couples have a ratio of at least 5 positive interactions for every 1 negative interaction. I realized our ratio was probably 1 to 5 or even worse. And these deposits weren't grand gestures. They were small things, sharing a 6-second kiss, showing genuine interest in their day, a simple thank you, a shared smile. They were tiny acts of kindness and attention. Gottman also talks about bids for connection. A bid is any attempt from one partner to another for attention, affirmation, or affection. When Mark would mention something from an article he read, that was a bid. I had been turning away by just grunting in response. This was my huge aha moment. Kindness isn't a personality trait you either have or you don't. It's a practice, a skill, a conscious choice you make over and over. I realized my kindness muscle had completely atrophied from lack of use. So I made a secret plan. I would become a scientist in my own relationship. My experiment. For 30 days, I would consciously make at least 5 positive deposits into our emotional bank account every single day without announcing it. The next morning, I was terrified. My plan felt silly and vulnerable. What if I made this effort and he didn't notice? Or worse, what if he was suspicious? The fear of being rejected, even in this small way, was huge. He was at the coffee maker, looking as tired as I felt. I walked up behind him, took a deep breath, and just put my hand on the small of his back for a moment. I said good morning, trying to put warmth in my voice. He flinched for a second, surprised, but then I felt the muscles in his back relax. He turned and looked at me, really looked at me, and a tiny, hesitant smile touched his lips. Morning, he said back, and his voice was softer than usual. It wasn't a movie moment. The heavens didn't open up, but it was something. It was a single drop of water in a bucket that had been dry for years. The air in the kitchen felt a little lighter. Later that day, he took out the recycling, a chore he always does without comment. Normally, I wouldn't have said anything. But this time, I made a point to look up from my laptop and say, hey, thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. He literally paused at the door, looking genuinely surprised. He just nodded and said, yeah, no problem. It was awkward, but it was another tiny crack in the wall of silence and assumption we had built. It wasn't easy to keep it up. Some days, the old resentment would creep back in and I wouldn't feel like being kind. It felt forced, and my brain screamed that *** should be the one trying. It took real energy to push through that. A few days in, he started complaining about a problem at work. My automatic impulse was to just nod and make aha sounds while scrolling my phone. Instead, I put my phone down, turned to him, and asked, "What did your boss say about that?" It was like I'd opened a dam. He talked for 20 minutes straight, telling me all the details and frustrations. I realized he hadn't really talked to me like that in years, simply because I hadn't created the space for it. After about a week of my secret experiment, I started to notice a real shift. The oppressive silence was being replaced by small talk, and the tension that used to hang in the air was beginning to dissipate. Our home was starting to feel like a home again. And then something amazing happened. He started reciprocating. One evening, he brought me a cup of tea without me asking. Another day, he remembered I had a difficult meeting and asked me how it went. He was making deposits into my bank account. I realized that by going first, by offering kindness without demanding it in return, I had created a positive feedback loop. My actions made him feel safe enough to be kind back. I hadn't forced him to change, I had invited him to. The real breakthrough came one night when I was cooking dinner. I made a dumb joke, the kind of silly pun I used to make all the time. And he didn't just smile, he threw his head back and let out a deep, genuine laugh. It was the best sound I had heard in years. After that laugh, it felt like my experiment was over, because it was no longer an experiment. It was just how we were starting to be with each other again. We were actively rebuilding what the silent erosion had destroyed. The touch barrier crumbled. We started holding hands while watching TV. I'd lean my head on his shoulder. His hugs were no longer stiff and formal, they were warm and real. It felt like my body was remembering a language it had missed. We even created a new little ritual. Before falling asleep, we'd each share one thing we appreciated about the other that day. It forced us to actively look for the good, to notice the small efforts we were both making. It wasn't a perfect upward line. There was a stressful week where we both slipped back into old habits. We were tired, short with each other, and the phones came out again. I felt a familiar pang of fear. Was it all temporary? But here's what was different. The next morning, instead of letting the silence fester, he looked at me and said, "Hey, I'm sorry I was so grumpy last night." And I could honestly say, me too. It was just a stressful week. We had learned how to repair. We still disagreed on things, of course. But kindness changed the nature of our conflicts. We stopped attacking each other and instead started attacking the problem together. It was no longer me versus him, it was us versus the issue. Our shared sense of humor, which I thought was dead, came roaring back to life. We started creating new inside jokes. Our home, which had been so quiet and heavy, was now filled with the sound of our laughter again. As I practiced kindness, my entire perception of him shifted. I stopped seeing him through a lens of resentment. Instead, I started to see the good, kind, funny man I had fallen in love with all those years ago. We brought back date nights, but with a new rule. Phones had to stay in the car or in my purse. We focused on actually talking, asking questions, and being present with one another. It was like getting to know him all over again. After about a month of this new dynamic, I finally told him everything. I explained my desperation that day in the car, the research I'd found, and my secret kindness experiment. I was nervous about how he'd react. He didn't get mad. He just got very quiet, and then he looked at me with so much sadness in his eyes and said, I knew we were losing each other, but I honestly had no idea how to stop it. I felt completely lost." That conversation changed everything again. My secret solo mission became our shared project. We were now a team, consciously working together to keep making those positive deposits and fighting against the pull of disconnection. Kindness became our compass. When we were stressed or about to have a difficult conversation, we learned to pause and ask ourselves, what is the kindest way to approach this? It didn't mean avoiding conflict, but handling it with respect. The feeling of being invisible was replaced by the beautiful feeling of being seen. He started noticing the little things again, just like I was. It turns out that when you start paying attention to someone, they start paying attention back. We built our new foundation on the smallest of acts. A sticky note on the bathroom mirror saying, "Have a great day." A text in the middle of the afternoon just to say, "I love you." These tiny gestures carried enormous weight. This culture of kindness made it safe to be truly vulnerable with each other again. I could admit when I was feeling scared or insecure, and he could do the same. This new level of emotional honesty deepened our intimacy more than I thought possible. Our relationship transformed from purely functional to genuinely fun. We started being silly, teasing each other, and trying new things together just for the hell of it. We weren't just running a household, we were sharing a life. Even the silence between us changed. It was no longer the tense, empty silence of disconnection. It was a comfortable, peaceful silence, the kind you can only share with someone you feel completely at ease with. We didn't just go back to how we were before. We built something new, something stronger. We now had the tools and the shared language to navigate the inevitable tough times. We knew how to consciously choose connection. The reward for all this work was the ultimate boon, deep intimacy. It's more than just love. It's the profound feeling of being known, seen, and cherished for exactly who you are. It's the feeling of being on the same team, no matter what. Today, our life doesn't feel like an experiment. It just feels good. Those small acts of kindness are now second nature. Our home is a true sanctuary, a place where we both feel safe, loved, and completely ourselves. I think about the contrast often. Mornings used to be a silent, tense rush. Now, we make a point to have 5 minutes together with our coffee to actually kiss goodbye. We start the day connected. Evenings used to be about collapsing on the couch and escaping into our phones. Now, we often put the phones away for the first hour we're both home. We talk, we cook together, we decompress as partners. We say I love you just as much, maybe more. But the difference is that now, when we say it, we pause. We look at each other. The words are filled with all the small acts of kindness that give them their true meaning. The other day I came home after getting a haircut, just a small trim. The second I walked in the door, he looked up and smiled. "Wow," he said, "your hair looks amazing." After feeling invisible for so long, that simple moment felt like a miracle. And my focus has changed too. I see him more clearly. I notice when work is weighing on him, and I make a point to tell him how proud I am of how hard he works. My energy goes towards appreciating him, not cataloging his faults. I used to think that being kind, especially when you feel hurt, was a form of weakness. I was so wrong. Choosing kindness is an act of incredible strength. It's the conscious choice to build connection rather than win an argument. If there is one thing I want to share from this journey, it's this: don't wait. Don't sit there keeping score, waiting for the other person to make the first move. You have the power to be the one who introduces kindness back into your relationship. A relationship is like a garden. You can't just plant it and expect it to flourish forever. It needs daily attention. Small acts of kindness are the water and sunlight, and without them, the weeds of resentment and neglect will always take over. The person you fell in love with is probably still in there, maybe feeling just as lost and lonely as you are. That connection you once had is so precious. It is worth fighting for, and that fight can begin with a single, small, gentle act. You cannot control your partner, but you can always control your own actions. You can choose to be a thermostat, setting the temperature in the room, rather than a thermometer that just reflects it. Choose to bring the warmth. I truly believe I saved my relationship from the silent erosion. We didn't just survive, we are now happier and more connected than ever. And it all started with that one simple, terrifying, powerful choice to be kind first.